What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G. Now, as always, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about each phone, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting a 6.56-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 269, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz PLS TFT display, and this phone also has a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So between the two, the displays are pretty much the same. Yeah, on one hand, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is a tiny bit larger, but honestly, you can't really tell that much. So in general, I don't really think one is significantly better than the other. That being said though, for what they are, these displays really aren't bad. At just around 6.5 inches, they're decently large, and despite only having 720p resolutions, the images do look pretty decent. So overall, for stuff like web browsing, reading, social media, things where you don't necessarily need the nicest image, but you do want a decently large display and a pretty good form factor, for that sort of activity, either phone will get the job done just fine. Now for storage, both phones are getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely a decent amount of storage here. On one hand, if you're more of a power user, if you're constantly downloading a bunch of apps, games, stuff like that, you are probably going to want to get a phone with more storage. But honestly, in this price range, you're probably not going to do much better anyway. So for what they are, I do think these phones have a decent amount of storage. And honestly, for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, and you make sure to use a microSD card whenever you can, 64GB is at least acceptable anyway. Now for security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys. So definitely good placement there. But starting with the OnePlus, let's go ahead and give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Galaxy A13 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a dual camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So as far as that goes, this camera is relatively featureless, but as you're about to see in a minute, the photo quality definitely makes up for this. Now with the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, we got pretty much the same water drop notch front facing camera. This camera is 5 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So for features, the A13 5G is a little bit better since it does have a macro camera, but there's still no ultra wide camera here, which is really too bad because at this point in 2023, I feel like for any phone, an ultra wide camera is more or less an expectation, since for the vast majority of phones in really any price range, an ultra wide camera is just not that hard to come by. But again, overall, between the two, if you do want a macro camera, then of course the A13 5G will have an advantage. Now, when it comes to photo quality, I feel like they're about the same. For what they are, both phones do have really impressive cameras. So while again, unfortunately, neither phone has an ultra wide camera, if you're really just taking more regular pictures and maybe using portrait mode, then either phone is going to be a great choice. To give you an idea of what they can do, here's a photo taken with portrait mode using the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. Definitely great quality. I really like the details, colors, everything looks really on point on this phone. And then here's a picture taken with portrait mode using the A13 5G. Really same kind of thing. I feel like the quality is about the same. Again, the colors and details and brightness and everything look really good here. So in general, if you're taking pictures for maybe Instagram, for example, where you might be using portrait mode a lot, but maybe not necessarily features like an ultra wide camera, then in that case, the camera setups with either phone are going to be perfectly fine. That being said, of course, again, if you want a macro camera, the A13 5G will have an advantage because it does have one, whereas the OnePlus Nord N300 5G doesn't. Now, as far as RAM and processor go, with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 810 processor. With the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, this phone is also getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700. Now, between the two, when it comes to overall performance, I would definitely say the OnePlus Nord N300 5G has quite an advantage. Don't get me wrong, this phone is still not as fast as like a mid-range phone, for example, but definitely between the two, you will see a pretty significant difference. So if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, maybe doing more stuff like mobile gaming, for example, that needs a bit more processing power, then I would definitely go with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G. But that being said, with the A13 5G, the performance isn't really bad, and the phone's not really that slow or anything. So if you're doing more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, and you're not really going to be on your phone that much, then the performance we're getting here is still going to be at least good enough. Now, I did run benchmark tests on both phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G has a significant advantage. So if you do want the faster phone between the two, then definitely keep this in mind. But on the other hand, again, for more basic activities, the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, while not being nearly as fast, will still most likely be at least good enough. Now for the batteries, both phones do have 5000 mAh batteries, so with either of them, you can expect to get great battery life and longevity. Definitely a nice thing to see in more entry-level phones. But that being said, one huge difference here is that with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, we are getting 33-watt fast charging, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G, this phone only supports 15, which on one hand, it's not really that bad in my experience. The charging speed is at least decent, but with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, the charging speed is actually really impressive. And not only this, but it actually does come with a 33-watt fast charger, so you can take full advantage of it right away. So while again, both phones do have great batteries that are going to get really good battery life, if charging speeds are important to you, the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is going to have a huge advantage. Another thing I do want to point out here is that both phones do have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, keep in mind either phone can do this no problem. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, in mostly subtle ways, I would say the OnePlus Nord N300 5G is the better device here. The main reason for this is that again, this phone does have significantly better performance, so if you're going to be on your phone a little bit more, or really just using it a decent amount in general, you will notice this phone being significantly faster, and overall you are going to get a better experience. In addition to this, while again both phones do have really good batteries, the fast charging with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, and the fact that it even includes a fast charger, really just makes a huge difference. And if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, then being able to take full advantage of 33-watt fast charging is definitely going to help. On the other hand though, the A13 5G really isn't a bad phone either. And again, this phone does have a macro camera, whereas the OnePlus Nord N300 5G doesn't. And while I honestly don't think that advantage is really enough to make a huge difference between the two, especially considering the performance difference we're getting with the OnePlus Nord N300 5G, if you really do want to get those close-up detailed images, then still definitely keep this in mind. But this concludes my comparison between the OnePlus Nord N300 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A13 5G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about each phone, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalip's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.